Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Motorsports on Forever Sports. It is the preview for the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, the second Grand Prix of the 2023 season. And of course, lots to talk about in terms of what we saw in Bahrain and what we could hopefully expect in Saudi Arabia. Lots of news has happened since Bahrain, of course, and lots of talk about what teams are going to be doing coming into the weekend. As I say, in the Middle East, there, Saudi Arabia, of course, a fantastic circuit, quite a bit tricky compared to Bahrain, and so it will certainly be a challenge for a lot of these cars. And hopefully, we shall see some different results compared to last time. I think it was very Red Bull orientated and dominated, which was very good for all Red Bull fans. But the rest of us, I think, the rest of us, in terms of the entire world, we're also looking at this thinking hopefully other teams can sort of just improve immeasurably because otherwise we are just going to run away with Red Bull. So one of the big talking points, of course, since the last Grand Prix is that of Mercedes.
Yes, obviously Mercedes publishing that letter saying that they obviously are apologizing for the first race of the Grand Prix of the season, saying they are not starting where they would once be starting. Yeah, really interesting to see Mercedes straight away from that first race, pretty much almost admitting defeat, really.
I know, pretty much admitting defeat before the season's even begun. And of course, the other interesting thing is that of Aston Martin is using the same engine as Mercedes, and yet they're doing a hell of a lot better than Mercedes. So for a team that's obviously a lot less funded and got far fewer resources than the likes of Mercedes, you do have to really wonder as to how they've managed to mess up so badly.
Well, yes, of course, you can't downplay Aston Martin. They've had a lot of backing from Lawrence Stroll, who's put a lot of money into that team. They've got a new wind tunnel coming online very soon. They've got a new factory as well that's coming online very soon. Definitely putting a lot into that team for the future. But yes, they've just had such a cracking start to the season. I mean, just doing so well in Bahrain. But yes, I think Mercedes are going to be very disappointed to have been beaten by a customer team, which is certainly not what we would be expecting in
No,
2023.
not at all. And we see here, there's an article here, and we go into it here from Hamilton, and it says, I will win again. Hamilton says he maintains 100% belief in Mercedes as seven-time champ vows to fight back with the team, notably. Of course, a couple of rumours started up, and obviously not really taking them all too seriously, but basically about him possibly leaving Mercedes due to them not being very competitive. Nonetheless, we have an article from Lewis Hamilton saying he does pledge his commitment to Mercedes amid their ongoing performance struggles, describing the squad as his family and stressing that he doesn't plan to go anywhere else in search of success. So,
Yes.
big statement, of course.
Yes, well, Lewis has been with Mercedes for quite a couple of years now, so of course he's going to be very close with the team as well as a lot of the integral team members. So he's certainly made himself very comfortable there. He doesn't want to have to move on to a new team. If he can get that car working again, he'll be very happy to stay. But if they are not able to produce a race-winning car, he will, of course, start looking elsewhere, as he has the right to do. He's a seven-time world champion.
And the likes of George Russell, we think about George Russell now, has arrived in this team thinking he's going to be a big shot, of course. And now Mercedes have really, delved lower than the likes of Ferrari and Aston Martin and are hanging on to that fourth spot right now. You talk about the big three, and they're not even currently in it. They fully concede that, as with their letter. They concede they're not even in the big three. So, George Russell's having gone there. I mean, what does he now do?
Well, I think someone as young as George Russell, I think you just have to stick it out for a little bit. I mean, Mercedes has shown how strong they can be. They've been so dominant in the past couple of years. I don't think you can necessarily write them off so quickly. I think certainly they will get to the bottom of it. Hopefully this year. If not, then next year they have to make a complete design change, of course. But I don't think you can write Mercedes off that.
No. And, of course, the interesting thing is they basically said that they're going to continue redeveloping the car basically this entire season. They're just going to really try and get it to race pace. So surely that means they're going to win. Can they make such a drastic decision as to add side pods back onto the car? Is that too much?
No. We've already seen from Toto Wolff, he's been speaking about a possible B-spec car, which we, as pundits, assume is a side pod version of their current car. Obviously, their current car that they're running has their zero side pod concept, which obviously in the name has no side pods. It just goes straight into the radiators. In theory, it should be a very, very fast car, but so far in practice, it just has not. been able to bring race wins. It's only brought obviously one in Brazil last year where they were starting to get to the bottom of it, but it just doesn't look like it is that strong again this year.
No, and we carry on with this article with regards to Hamilton. We talk about Hamilton having been an interesting topic, of course, and it carries on here. It says Hamilton is in his final year of his current Mercedes deal, and has faced frustration at the season opening Bahrain Grand Prix, when the team found themselves fourth best behind Red Bull, Ferrari, and Aston Martin. After the race, Hamilton told the BBC's Checkered Flag podcast that Mercedes didn't listen to him regarding the development of their 2023 car, which retained a unique zero-side pod design, while plenty of rivals moved towards the Red Bull concept. Of course, that's keeping the side pods. And when asked about those comments, said if he determined to remain with Mercedes and get back to winning ways, Hamilton admitted, "I mean, in hindsight, I think looking back, it wasn't necessarily the best choice of words. But of course, there are times when you're not in agreement with certain team members. What's important is that we continue to communicate, we continue to pull together." So again, another interesting point that we talked about is the fact that Hamilton clearly didn't seem to be all too keen on the zero side pods idea.
No, I think he would have been against it fairly quickly. In 2022, he would have been very vocal about the fact that the team has gone in one direction quite radically compared to everyone else on the grid. Every single other car on that grid has side pods, and they're the only team without them, and it's not working.
No.
So of course Hamilton's going to be critical of it.
Yeah, but as I say, still saying that he's gutsy and he's holding on to his team, and that he does firmly believe in working on the car. As he continues here, he says, "I still have 100% belief in this team. It is my family, and I've been here a long time, so I don't plan on going anywhere else. But we all need a kick. We all need to get on. The proof is in the pudding. We've seen when the performances, where the performances, and how people are extracting the performance. We've got to now start making some bold decisions, some big moves in order to close the gap to these guys." Of course, then referring to Red Bull and their dominant 1-2 result in the season opener, Hamilton continued, "Otherwise, they're going to, they will run away with it most likely this year, unless Ferrari can probably stop them. We'll wait and see." But as I said, hopefully at some point during the year, we're hopeful we might be able to close the gap. At some point, it will probably be too late in terms of fighting for a championship, but we can still turn some heads, hopefully. So lots of work for Mercedes to do, and basically conceding to the fact that they're not only worse than Red Bull, but that of Ferrari, and quite possibly even Aston Martin.
Yes, well, before the season started, I predicted that there might be a bit of a shuffle up if they didn't change that concept of the car. I said that possibly Aston Martin might kick them out of the top three, and so far they have. Certainly very disappointing to see that Mercedes is not able to bring the fight to those top three teams. But let's see what happens. It's a very long season, 23 races in total, only one race down, still another 22 to go, so you never know what can happen.
No, and of course then we talk about Aston Martin. It says, why am Aston Martin riding a high into Saudi Arabia, and how they can keep that momentum up. Of course then we've got Fernando Alonso smiling, because he is as chuffed as a bunny at the moment to be with Aston Martin. Of course, leaving Alpine last year and coming into this Aston Martin team, he's basically joined one of the best teams on the grid automatically, and he didn't even necessarily recognize it. And he must be as chuffed as anything right now.
Yes, for sure. He's certainly taken over the reins from Sebastian Vettel. He's just landed his bum in the butter, really. He's landed himself into a possibly championship fighting team. It's certainly sad to think about what would have happened if Sebastian did stay in that team. Could you imagine a Sebastian Fernando lineup? Obviously, you can't get rid of Lance Stroll. His dad owns the team.
Get rid of him.
Well,
but so you talk about Aston Martin having, possibly would have had Vettel and Alonso. It's there are so many memes in the last week basically saying Vettel seeing Fernando Alonso get to enjoy this Aston Martin, which is so brilliant basically compared to their previous cars. And I would be very interested to know Seb's comments, and if he would have stayed on had he known that the Aston Martin was going to be so powerful. Because I think one of the main reasons why he also gave up, not gave up, but ended his career early was two factors. Of course, that being he was tired. He wants to get on with other things, wants to get going with his life for the rest of it. And the other part of it might well have been, but he didn't tell everybody, was that he's not really going to be racing for a challenging team, so he doesn't really want to play around in the midfield and just kill his career off. He's had such an illustrious career.
Well, of course not. He's a four-time world champion. Of course, you're not going to want to sit in the midfield for years upon years. He did it in Ferrari, which was quite disappointing and embarrassing, really. Not too much on his side, but Ferrari really did not do very well with him, as well as they did not have many good decisions, unfortunately.
And on the flip side to that, then you have Alonso now, who's obviously taken the reins from Vettel, and he's basically said, well, I was fighting midfield for a few years, but now I'm back, and quite possibly, certainly putting his hand up as being the best driver on the grid, just in terms of his sheer experience. And you saw it in the Bahrain Grand Prix, how experienced and how insane some of those overtakes were. That overtake on Carlos Sainz was brilliant. I mean, one of the most difficult turns in the whole circuit, and he takes him there. It was insane.
Yes, I mean, of course, Fernando Alonso having so much experience out on track, not only in Formula One, but in IndyCar as well as World Endurance Championships. I mean, he almost won IndyCar a couple of years ago, the Indy 500, and then he has won World Endurance Championships while he has been away from Formula One. And then coming back into Formula One at, I think it was just, he's in his 40s, and still being able to fight with the youngsters. I mean, just shows how strong he is, not only mentally, but still physically at, I think, 45?
No, 41.
41,
Not
sorry.
quite as old as that. But yes, we read this article, as we said, talk about how dominant Aston Martin have been. And Aston Martin are doing their best to keep their feet planted to the ground after an impressive podium in the season opener. But there's a growing belief outside the team that the green cars will cause quite a stir consistently this year. When billionaire Lawrence Stroll entered Formula One and rebranded Racing Point as Aston Martin, he had one goal: to make the operation consistent World Championship contenders. And unfortunately I can't read on, but nonetheless, it is certainly looking like that could possibly be the case. Of course, they're currently sitting second in the Constructors' Championship. Of course, Ferrari having had that retirement, and Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz only finishing behind Fernando Alonso. Both the Aston Martin cars finished in, I think it was respectively third and sixth or seventh. I think it was sixth.
Yes,
But nonetheless,
But I think one of the main things that we've seen from Aston Martin is that they're not scared to move away from a certain design concept that they'd come up with themselves. They're not scared to change to another team's design concept that works. I mean, we've seen in the Racing Point days where they would just completely change to a different team, reminiscing on the pink Mercedes. Now they are green Red Bull. It just shows sometimes it doesn't hurt to actually adopt another team's concept.
Yeah, and of course we're just under 20 hours away from the second Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, and we've talked about Mercedes, we've talked about Aston Martin, and it's not much to talk about Red Bull. They're just going to rock up and basically say, cool, we know exactly what we're doing. We've got a fantastic car, probably the best car on the grid. We've got the best drivers on the grid. We've got the best team on the grid. They're just going to go about business as per usual. So Max Verstappen surely just looks at this and thinks, yeah, no, in the bag here. Easy as, just needs to make sure he gets decent qualifying lap in, and he should be fine. But of course, another team that we need to really talk about is that of Charles Leclerc's team being Ferrari.
Yes, obviously, big news coming into this weekend is that Charles Leclerc has a 10-place grid penalty for Sunday. His team giving him another set of controlled electronics. This is his third set for the season already. He only allowed 2. He's on his third set going into the second race. Very, very disappointing so far from Ferrari. Hopefully he doesn't have to take any more penalties throughout the season for this specifically. But yes, certainly not looking very good going into the season. I mean, second race, third Steve. Really
It's really disappointing. And of course, if you're in the comments, tell us what you think about Ferrari so far and their performance after that first Grand Prix. And are you scared for the whole season if you're a Ferrari fan right now, having had reliability problems the entirety of last season? And now having the same problems again, you've got to really worry.
Yes, well, for those who don't know, Charles Leclerc took his first replacement controlled electronics for the Sunday Grand Prix of Bahrain, and then during that Grand Prix they failed, which caused that retirement from the Ferrari. So they are now hoping they've fixed the issue with a new set of controlled electronics. And we will have to see throughout this race weekend.
Yeah, so not just one, not just two, but the third set of electronics. So we look at Leclerc remains confident, however, that something special is definitely possible in Jeddah despite the 10-place grid penalty. We read on here, it says Charles Leclerc is set to take a 10-place grid penalty at this weekend's Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. And while he knows it's not been an ideal start to the season following his DNF in Bahrain, the Ferrari driver is still confident that a special result in Jeddah is very much possible. While running in third place last time out in Bahrain, Leclerc stopped on track with a power unit issue just after Ferrari had replaced the energy store and control electronics on his engine prior to the season opener. Following an investigation into the issue, the Scuderia announced on Wednesday that they would be fitting Leclerc's SF23 with another control electronics power unit component, giving him a 10-place grid penalty for the second race of the season. And he goes on to say, it's the way it is. It's the beginning of the season. Of course, it's not the ideal start that I wish I had at the beginning, starting in Bahrain, but what can I do about it? Now we need to focus on what is ahead, what we can do as better as a team to do better, said five-time race winner Leclerc. This weekend, we are starting from the back foot, but our target is to try and do something special. I like this challenge of starting a little bit more on the back foot and try to do something special and come back to the front as quickly as possible. So
it's certainly going to be difficult. I mean, that midfield as well as the top 10 are looking so competitive at the moment. It's going to be very difficult for sure to make his way through that grid, especially to get past those green Aston Martins. Lance Stroll will certainly be on pace this weekend. Obviously, with his surgeries that he had on both wrists as well as his, I think on his right foot, his big toe. He should be back up to strength and be able to possibly match Fernando Alonso. That's yet to be seen, but yes, certainly a very difficult weekend ahead for Charles Leclerc.
100%. And of course, now we read on here, Reece, and if you just read on here for the article here, and it just goes on to say, when asked whether his role has been to galvanize the squad since the DNF in Bahrain, Leclerc replied, he says, well, yes, because it's only the first race of the season and we've still got many races to go and we still need to be fighting like crazy to be back at the top and keep pushing.
Yes, well, of course, they need to still be able to keep pushing. They obviously have to keep up in terms of the points with Red Bull. You don't want them to get away so early in the season. Obviously, Red Bull showing such dominance already, but you certainly don't want to let them run away. I mean, it's the second race of the season, and I mean, Red Bull already just showing that they are possibly the only title contenders for 2023 right now.
I think the only ones that you could also consider, as I say, I mean, it's a very big outside chance, is that of Aston Martin. And when we talk about Aston Martin, I still think what happened with the track there is the fact that Bahrain, there's lots of improvements obviously to be made, and Aston Martin have got a bigger leeway in terms of improvements than that of Red Bull. And of course, Red Bull are well ahead of them. But perhaps, Aston Martin are not actually as far behind as they think they are. I mean, they were really not far off for qualifying, and had Fernando Alonso started up the grid, put himself in first place in that qualifying session, you might well have seen better fighting in a much longer race for Red Bull. They wouldn't have gone away with it as a way, because I think that Aston Martin's got enough pace to stay with those Red Bulls in a DRS zone type of scenario. If Fernando Alonso is fighting it out at the top, I reckon that car probably does actually have enough pace to try and challenge those Red Bulls a little bit.
Yes, well, of course, everything's a bit of an if at the moment. We don't necessarily know. We haven't seen them fighting out over a long race distance. I mean, we've seen how close they are in qualifying, but that Red Bull is just so strong in race pace, you never know. I don't think that the Aston Martin is necessarily as strong in race pace. I mean, you have to think that they have adopted Red Bull's 22-spec car. Red Bull have then evolved that to 2023. Of course, it's going to be a little bit stronger, but of course, Aston Martin are able to develop that car now over the rest of the season, where Red Bull don't have a lot of
leeway with regards to that. That's the problem, for not just coming first, but of course having those penalties due to those infringements they had with the FIA. So we also look at this, and as long as Aston Martin stay within touching distance of the Red Bulls, which at the moment they're doing, of course they're only one race in, but if they can do it again this weekend, they can develop a lot more than Red Bull can this season, and perhaps they can get really, really close to challenging them, which would be really fun. And of course, hopefully, Ferrari can be the other team. Charles Leclerc goes and says he wants to do something special this weekend, and Carlos Sainz, of course, managed to get in a half decent result for Ferrari in the Bahrain Grand Prix. But if Ferrari can hopefully fix the issue they had there with regards to Charles Leclerc's electronics unit, and Carlos Sainz doesn't have an issue with it either, because it's only in Charles Leclerc's car that showed problems. So it's interesting that Carlos Sainz has yet to show problems with regards to that unit. We'll be seeing this weekend as to whether or not that causes problems. But only Charles Leclerc had those issues, and if they can fix those issues, Charles Leclerc's Ferrari did not look particularly slow.
No, I mean, it was fast. It's certainly still not fast enough to match the race pace of those Red Bulls. I think the biggest thing that they will be working on this weekend is just trying to get to the bottom of their tyre degradation. Obviously, over the race last week, well, not last week, the week before, we saw how Red Bull were just so good on their tyre degradation. They were able to look after those tyres till later in the race, whereas Ferrari just ate up those tyres so quickly, which meant they had to really drop back in pace a bit to be able to conserve them. This is where you want to try and close the gap quite a lot. It's mostly in setup change, but obviously there's lots of little things that you can do to try and make your tyre degradation a little bit better.
And of course, this is not Saudi Arabia. It's different to Bahrain. There's no doubt about it. It's a different track. The way in which the tire degradation works in this track will be quite a bit different to Bahrain, most likely. And so it depends on how the teams can manage it there and which tires they use, of course. So, if the tire degradation issue falls away in this race, then it puts them right up there, hopefully, alongside the likes of Red Bull. And, we read on with regards to Charles Leclerc wanted to pull off a miracle with his 10 place grid penalty. He says, I still believe in it. And, of course, we still need to believe in it because it's only the first race. Well, it was only in the first race, I think it means. So it hasn't gone as planned. And when it's Ferrari, when Ferrari and the situation doesn't go as well as it should, then there are lots of voices and all this around the team. There's no doubt Scuderia are the biggest team in Formula One. You can take Red Bull and put it up there, but at the end of the day, the biggest racing team that ever has been and ever will be is the Scuderia and that Ferrari. And of course, he's not wrong in saying, at the moment anything goes wrong or something happens, everybody's going to be talking about them, which they do. And he goes and adds, but we need to be good at spending our energy right inside the team, pushing in the same direction to make a difference and come back stronger. Even with the DNF, Ferrari, by their own admission, had struggled to match rivals. Red Bull for pace in Bahrain. But when asked if they could change what could change in Jeddah, Leclerc said it should suit us a little bit better. Very interesting. Bahrain is also a very specific track, so I hope the delta pace we've seen will not be the same here. But our car characteristics should fit better at this track, so hopefully it will be the case. But something special is definitely possible in this car. His teammate Carlos Sainz, on the other hand, who finished fourth in Bahrain, was also feeling confident about Ferrari's chances in Jeddah, as he also cited the different nature of the track as a reason for the Scuderia to feel upbeat heading into the weekend. He says, I want to think so, said Sainz, when asked if a podium finish is possible in Jeddah. The track is completely different to Bahrain, the tarmac, high-speed nature, but is it enough to beat the Red Bull? Given how tough and how competitive they were in Bahrain, it's going to be extremely difficult, but I want to be more optimistic after Bahrain, and this weekend I feel we have a good chance to be back on the podium.
Yes, well, Saudi Arabia being such a high-speed circuit, we're certainly hoping to see Ferrari being a lot closer. I mean, they've made gains over the winter in their engine department. They were about 30 horsepower down last season because they had to tune down their engines for reliability issues, whereas over the winter season they were able to get rid of these gremlins and hopefully unlock that extra 30 horsepower, which should hopefully help them to be close to the Red Bull down the straights, which is where they were certainly lacking last year.
And I think, so much has been predicted, and we are very guilty of it as well. There's so much that we've said about the season, not necessarily writing off teams completely, but certainly saying that certain instances and scenarios have already happened, and that, Red Bull are going to run away with it in the season, and the Scuderia have already got problems, so we're not so focused on them. Aston Martin are a great team to watch, and Mercedes are out. It's one race in of a 23 race calendar. There's so much more that we're going to see. I mean, Red Bull also, don't forget, we did testing in the Bahrain track. So all of those cars fitted their cars as best as possible for that Bahrain circuit. So when it came to the Bahrain Grand Prix, they already knew exactly what was going to happen with regards to those cars. There was no surprises whatsoever. Saudi Arabia, different story. They've not been on this track in these cars. They haven't. Tomorrow's going to be the first time all these cars get to try it out, and they've only got 3 practices in which to sort it out. And it's a very different track to Bahrain. Hopefully, some teams have done some modifications since last Grand Prix. They've seen what worked, what didn't work. They're going to make those modifications to get closer, because Red Bull aren't going to really change anything, but all the other teams can change. So the only thing you can really see happen is that gap to Red Bull shrink. So,
well, I don't necessarily know if we'll see that. I think Red Bull are still going to be extremely strong. We've seen how dominant they are on street circuits, and they seem to quite like Jeddah, especially with them being so fast down the straights. But we will have to see. Hopefully tomorrow will give us some sort of indication. But I mean, of course, you say that it's the first time teams are coming here with these cars. It's not necessarily true. I mean, they came here last year with the new spec or new generation of Formula One cars. They gathered so much information at each track they go to. They put all of that into the sim, and they can pretty much simulate an entire race weekend.
yes, nonetheless, we do see all these issues and different things occur once they're actually on track. And of course, lots of development has hopefully happened since Bahrain, especially for the teams like Mercedes and the others. Of course, McLaren is another team that we really, really want to see improve. Alpine should have done better than what they did. Alfa Romeo, they're there and thereabouts. William had a decent improvement inside the race itself. AlphaTauri is there and thereabouts as well. There's not much to talk about in terms of those teams. We do look at our big 4 teams now, essentially, and we do watch them with keen eyes, and we are so interested to see what happens this weekend. And of course, lots and lots can happen. We're not even making any predictions necessarily, other than the fact that I think Red Bull will still walk away with it this weekend. But I'm hoping to see some teams get closer. Maybe something big happens in the opening corners. Maybe Verstappen comes under pressure, crashes out or something. Something can happen. We don't know. Very keen, of course, for the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, which starts in just under 19 and a half hours until the first practice session tomorrow in Saudi Arabia. So keen to see them. And of course, you can stream it and watch it along with us on Forever Sports, on Forever Motorsports as well. We and Reece will be there for most of the sessions, and of course, you can feel free to comment, participate, ask us questions, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the videos, of course, so that you can get more and more content. On Forever Sports, of course, we share so much Formula One content. We keep you in the loop as best we can. We have shows on Monday, Thursday, and then we have videos every other time, and we live stream every session for the Formula One weekend. So, of course, be sure to stick around, subscribe, like the video, and check me and Reece more as we go.
Yes, of course. And we also have later this evening, we're doing a live stream on our Forever Sports Extra channel, just doing a game play along of the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. There should be about, I think it's
about 7 or 8 of us going to be racing around Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. It's sure to be very, very good fun, a good laugh. We will be doing it live on the Forever Sports Extra channel. That's our other channel there, one of our partner channels. You can go and click our channel, and you can go and find it there in the other channels we support. And of course, be sure to come and watch that. It'll be a good laugh. And nonetheless, also you can go and see exactly how not to race the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. That is, of course, if you're following any car, but Reece does know how to race this game very well. The rest of us, we'll be just participating for the sake of it. So, of course, be sure to join us there as well. You guys have been watching Forever Motorsports on Forever Sports. I've been Mark, Reece has been Reece, and thank you so much for watching. We're so keen for the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Be sure to join us on the channel, of course, for every single session. And share with your friends, subscribe, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.